Well, it's a challenging subject to speak of the will, since Master D.K. tells us we know practically nothing about it, but we can venture into our attempts, the will, the way, and the path between. When we enter the stage of more advanced esotericism, and you know, there's a forcing process going on now, so it can be done more rapidly when the point of tension, a focus, is sufficient. We'll all do this at some point. We begin to tread the path of will and the way of will, on the way to realizing ourselves as pure being. The path of will, the way of will, and the realization of ourselves as pure being. Master D.K. says, I am an initiate into the mysteries of being. And this should tell you something, he says. This path and this way first demand that we know what it is to be an increasingly soul-infused personality, a process which is, for the most part, completed at the third initiation. Not completely, it's really completed at the fourth initiation. When the causal body, you know, the egoic lotus, is destroyed, and we are liberated into close communion with the spirit and the monad, which we essentially are. Well, you know, that lies ahead for all of us, I dare say. It's a rare enough thing to be a third degree initiate, and then to take the fourth degree, a consummation devoutly to be hoped, you know. It is a consummation. Master D.K. has offered us a new and higher way of advancement, because the abilities of disciples in the modern world are in advance of those of their predecessors. Sometimes we forget this, you know, and we imagine that there's been no progress in disciplic understanding since the days of the first apostles and the Christ of Jesus, you know. Nothing has happened, and that those disciples are the ones we have to look up to as something extremely special. But Alice Bailey seems to tell us something different. I mean, they did a great job, of course, but the human intellect is always advancing, and new methods of spiritual approach are now necessary. So we have to be in the avant-garde of these new methods. Naturally, it is the first ray, and this is a first ray conference, which is especially associated with the will, though being itself, I'm always going to be talking about being, you know. Being itself is the source of all the rays and all the aspects. Out of being comes all things, synthesizing all qualities. But the first ray is the first to emerge, obviously. The first ray is thus far maybe the least understood ray, because it is, this is interesting, it's temporarily occultly deflected by our solar logos, the logos of our system, the great God of our system, because he's trying to develop the consciousness aspect of divinity. So it's interesting, an occult deflection. There's not as much first ray in the system as there will be in the next solar system. You know, we have one more to run, in which our logos will have, at least I think so, a first ray personality, even as the logos now has a second ray love wisdom personality as well as a second ray soul. So it's an ongoing second ray soul with ray 3 personality, last system, ray 2 this system, and a will personality the next system. And then we'll be much more familiar with the first aspect of divinity, and we'll be able to assimilate that far more easily. But meanwhile, people are in training to be able to do that. You know, because a lot of help will be needed, and we're told that before long, many initiates of the 5th degree will be required. And he says many initiates of the 5th degree. So hold on to your hat. Yet for all that, we do live, interestingly enough, here on Earth, on an essentially, I emphasize that word, essentially first-rate planet. Why do I say that? because the monadic ray of our planetary logos is the first ray of will and power, even though it's fairly occultly ineffective because we are still a non-sacred planet. But in the future, our planet will be a leading first-ray chakra in the system of our solar logos, the base of the spine center, actually, in our solar logos. I guess some of you have known that. Interesting thought. Trillions of years ahead, according to the Brahmanical chronology which HPB gave us, Madame Blavatsky. Sounds like a long time, but we'll get there. And you know, if we don't get there, well, just imagine if you were an initiate of some kind or other, and you were trying to take the fifth initiation without an active base of the spine center. You couldn't do it. And the chances are that our solar logos can take not only the fourth cosmic initiation, which is promised in this system, but the fifth. And that logos will need the Earth in order to do it. And the Earth will have to be activated according to its monadic ray and a sacred planet. In other words, things are going to heat up on Earth. You want to be part of that? Well, can't help it. Okay, so the door to the path of will and the way of being are opening up before us. Just the beginning, of course, to be sure, for the kinds of beings that we are, okay? Just the beginning, but opportunity is with us if we could only see our opportunity. That would motivate us so tremendously. So that opportunity must be accompanied by as much understanding as possible. To use the will with understanding is the key, and you can't even use it rightly without proper understanding. Maybe not a lot of understanding, but enough to really get started on actually knowing what the will might be. So, as I often do, let us begin with a definition of terms. And some of these are DK's definitions, and some of them I've thrown in. So we want to use the fifth ray a little bit to be as clear as we can about what we're talking about. So, since this conference is called The Will and the Way, we have to at least define two terms, the will and the way. And the term path will come in there as well. So what is the will? Now there's, from Raised in Initiations, 168, DK tells us, I'm going to toss these off, but every one of them could require a year of deep thought, okay? But we have to get started, right? So Master DK defines the will as divine synthesis in action. Okay. This necessitates an understanding of the poorly understood term synthesis. There are many ways to look at synthesis, but I might call it, he's not talking now, I'm trying to talk. I might call it by the perhaps enigmatic phrase, I'm calling synthesis diversity in identicality. Diversity in identicality, which I realize it requires some pondering. Divine synthesis in action. Master DK, speaking probably of the disciple, also defines the will in this way, quote, at the present his will nature is largely embryonic. That's us, right? Because will is not determination, not persistent intelligent effort or emphasized desire. It is the scientific application of a peculiar energy whose qualities are synthesis, the power to detach from limitation, that's a good one, the destruction of boundaries, or as it is sometimes called in the language of esotericism, the ability, this is his word, to perforate the ring-pass knot of the blended soul and form and release the spirit into the larger life. Now that's a great definition. I won't repeat it now, but if you want it, I'll give it to you. I'll give you this talk, and it's listed here. I like that idea of freedom connected with the will. And one day, the whole temple of Ezekiel, which is our monadic body on the monadic plane, will be left behind by the escaping volatile essence, which is the essence of what we are, and will be liberated into the sea of fire. Well, we have a few more steps before we do that. like maybe controlling the astral body. Why not? Okay. Here is another important definition. The will aspect, or Atma, in man has for its distinctive feature, this is interesting, that coherent force which keeps the purpose of an entity ever in view. The will sustains and reveals and holds in view the purpose, working it out through love in substantial form. So it's a great sustaining force, but it's more than that. And here's another. The will, as considered and understood by the initiate, is essentially that monadic essence qualified by fixed determination which is identified with the will or purpose of the planetary logos. So the human will has to be fixedly determined to be identified with the will or purpose of the planetary logos. It is the highest divine aspect which the initiate finally masters prior to entering upon the way of higher evolution. And you know what that is? That's your 7 paths which lead you to the stars and to the constellations and eventually to the Pleiades, which is the hub of our local supercosmic wheel. Okay, so we're on our way, right? Pure will, and that's from Dinah 2, and you know, I'll give this to you, but Dinah 2, page 287. Pure will is also referred to as, quote, necessitous desire. Necessitous desire, which means a desire intensely directed towards the manifestation of the divine plan and purpose, which are divinely necessary. So in other words, unless there's necessity according to the plan and purpose, you don't have will. So this will is not, as so many believe, a forceful expression of intention. It is not a fixed determination to do thus and so, or to make certain things happen, you know, things to be. Now this is a big one. It is fundamentally an expression of the law of sacrifice. You know, we have our sacrifice petals in the egoic lotus, and the whole idea is we're trying to make the whole universe sacred, start with our planet, according to the divine plan and purpose. Fundamentally an expression of the law of sacrifice. Under this law, the unit, that's us, recognizes responsibility, identifies itself with the whole, and learns the esoteric significance of the words, this is from St. Paul, having nothing, sacrifice, and yet possessing all, universality. Having nothing, yet possessing all. I would ask you to reflect, says DK, upon these words of the great initiate St. Paul. The full expression of these highest spiritual qualities from the angle of the modern man comes after the fourth initiation, that of the great renunciation. Everything is then relinquished in order that everything may be held in trust and used for the good of all. The will to good dominates. You know the old saying, a tough one, to those who give all is given. You know that one. Doing it is harder than to know what it means. Hence the necessity for the scientific construction of the rainbow bridge, hence the emphasis upon the monad, the father aspect, which can now be revealed and known, because the work of eons is culminating in general soul contact where humanity as a whole is concerned. So we're justified in pursuing this curriculum of the will. We're justified in seeking the way to pure being, the way through the triad to the monad via the antikarana. I know these are technical terms and all that, but it can be made real to us if we will just try to understand and practice. There is so much written about the will in Master DK's works, and it's really the study of a lifetime or more than a lifetime, you know. We just have to be realistic about that. I will say, you know, from my perspective, that the divine will is the guarantor of divine purpose. Will sees purpose into manifestation and sustains purpose. Otherwise, everything just disappears. Will also, this is a little technical, withdraws the procritically submerged, or let's say matter submerged, universal monad out of its prison. Will draws the matter-immersed universal monad out of its prison and restores it to its original nature by the time of the day be with us. What's the day be with us? It's a nice big pralaya which makes the universe disappear. Okay, how many times has the universe disappeared? More than you want to know. Okay. Countless, can't count them, can't count them. If you start counting infinity, it becomes finite and that's it. It's disappeared endless times. Okay, and reappeared. And you've been there every time. Oh, not as you look right now, but you know, I'm sure you look very well on those days, you know. We were all there, can't separate us, sorry. Okay, will is a sustained point of tension which brings about accomplishment. You know, that point of tension idea is very, very intense focus. What is a point of tension? Focused, immovable will, we're told. Now just imagine that you could focus so intensely that your intention or resolution would be accomplished in a few days rather than a number of years. And he tells us that can happen. Just achieve a sufficient point of tension and we will have the accomplishment within a few days that would normally take years. Now, does that sound preposterous? I mean, the master said it. What can I say, you know? He also said that it's possible to take the second, third, and fourth initiation in the same life, and probably you will. Does that sound tough? I'm sure it's not easy. Okay. All right, but why not? That's what he says. Okay. If you don't believe me, go to page 84 and 85 of Initiation Human and Solar. In the very first book. Okay. The will brings forth, holds in place, or disrupts a particular configuration of energies. You know, it's Shiva, isn't it? Creator, sustainer, destroyer. It contains all the other Hindu deities in the Trimurti. Will is, in many ways, the old term, the prime mover. You've heard it in theology and so forth, the prime mover. Thus there is, okay, I'll divide it up. There's an originating, aggregating power of the will, originating, aggregating. Then there's a holding power of the will, and then also a dispersive power of the will. And we all do this, you know, constantly with our lives. We come together, we hold it in place for a while, then we fall apart. Okay. The originator aggregator, the holder preserver, and the destroyer disperser. It does all those nice things. Nothing moves or does not move without the will. So, you know, the will is, well, what is the will? Anyway, we'll get there. Will is the cause of manifestation, of the manifestation of the divine purpose as I see it. The will brings purpose into manifestation, or I call it self-objectification. I call manifestation self-objectification. All it means is you're looking at yourself, the great being is looking at itself, and that looking at itself becomes the universe. It's a selective looking at itself. It's a finitized looking at itself, not the whole thing, because the universe is not infinite, even though the great being is. So I'm saying manifestation is self-objectification. Okay, does that put us to sleep? I hope not. The will is that which executes archetypal design. On the plane of purpose, on the monadic plane, and on monadic planes beyond that, there's this wonderful configurations of purpose, of divine design, and the will makes sure that these things happen. So not only did the will bring archetypal design forth into self-objectification in the world of being, that's the monadic plane I call it, but the will carries archetypal design into the world of becoming. To use the old Greek terms, the world of being, the world of becoming. What has that got to do with me? Well, I have an archetypal design, don't I, don't we? And it is in the world of being, isn't it? And it needs to come forth into the world of becoming, doesn't it? So it does have to do with me, doesn't it? Okay, the will is that which singles out certain relationships for emphasis or activation or destruction. You know, it's a very targeting kind of thing. The Shambhala will, you know, if you want to put your finger in the socket and just hold it there, you're entitled, but usually you withdraw it. And the Shambhala power is called the power that touches and withdraws. just in time, usually. Okay. The will is intimately related to the factor of direction and controls the factor of direction in all beings. And obviously a choice is made with direction, because you can't go in all directions at the same time. Or can you? Well, maybe the great being can, but we limited emanations go in a certain direction. And emanation is a direction. We are a direction. We, coming forth from the universal logos. The will is that which sustains existence or relegates to non-existence. Now existence, existence is not what happens in the absolute. Existence is what happens in the universe. So it is, in a way, in the realm of the Mahamaya, the great Maya, which is the universe, or in the realm of self-objectification. Existence is not being. Now, usually we use, oh, I exist, I am, usually the same, right? But it's not. Existence is not being. Existence is derivative of being. Does that make sense? Being always is, always, and cannot really be affected by the will. Now, what am I saying? Being cannot be affected by the will. Think about that for a minute. Being is superior to will. Will is always secondary to being. Now, these are philosophical ideas, but they can make a difference in how you see the world. And I've thought long and hard on these things, which doesn't mean they're correct, but it brings you close to madness, but that's the price you pay. In all simplicity, thank God, the will is that which ensures accomplishment of intention. That's practical. That this shall exist, that this shall not exist, this we use to fulfill our intention. Okay, but now let's get a little practical. Whew. Okay, will, psychologically, is also willingness. Willingness is acquiescence to a category of will. It's saying yes to that which impels towards the accomplishment of an intention. I think the greatest, it'll be spoken of coming up, but the greatest willingness there was, for us, was in the Garden of Gethsemane with the Christ expressing his willingness to do the divine will as he began to understand it coming from Sanat Kumara. Without willingness, will is pretty useful. Useless. Sorry. Oops. Okay. These Freudian slips. What is the degree of our willingness? We should ask ourselves that when we seek to know the state of our will. Okay. If we practice willingness, and I'm talking to myself as much as to you, right? If we practice willingness in terms of our soul-ordained duty, we will then learn what will really is. So we can talk about will till we're quite blue, but the experience of the will is that which we seek, and unavoidably it requires sacrifice. So, okay, now I'm going to differentiate. I have been doing this in our pre-conference. The world of the soul exhibits sacrificial will. The world of the triad demonstrates spiritual will. The will of the triad is spiritual will. The will of the monad is divine will. And all of this is on the human scale. So the sacrificial will of the soul, the spiritual will of the triad in relation to our planetary logos, and ultimately the divine will of the monad in relation to our solar logos. We all have a place called home, at least for a while, inside our solar logos. The monad is that which finds its home within the sun. So, we're heading for that wherever else we may go. So how then, when we don't even understand these things, shall we name the will of great constellational, galactic, and supergalactic beings? How shall we name the will of the universal logos? But I think we can stay a little closer to home. But you see, it's a huge thing, just the way the Antakarana is a huge thing. Oh, I built my Antakarana, reached the monad. Well, welcome to the happy news that that's just the beginning, right? Nirvana is but the beginning of the endless way. That's what we're told in the Evans Wentz books, and the Tibetan quotes that. So are you ready for the endless way? Because you've already done it infinitudinous times. That's the thought. Okay, so, however, we do understand that as exalted as will may be, it has to be practiced. Somehow we have to offer our acquiescence to the will through willingness. And it has to become part of our spiritual lives. And this is not going to be easy if, like, you know, we have those moments when we're really identified as a personality. Have you ever had such a moment? But probably, you know, there are times when somehow we're identified as a personality, and then the will is really remote. So the workers in the hierarchy have a lot more will than we can imagine. And as we take the higher and higher initiations, we will understand this. And right now, we're just at the beginning of the study of will. Will as we understand it is not the will as the masters understand it. And as our, you know, the seventh sense is called the esoteric sense. So as that esoteric sense grows, so will our understanding of the will. Is it worth it? Well, what else is worth it, okay? Meanwhile, I advise us all, and myself, to make a profound study of the will. Now, something practical. Didn't I promise that a few minutes ago and didn't deliver? I think so. All right. We are workers in the vineyard of the Lord. The Lord is Sanat Kumara, the Lord is the Christ, and we're needed as never before, right? So we have to be strong, that's the strong will. We have to be dedicated. We have to be selfless. How do you do that? You know, most people feel pretty good about the fact that they're selfless. That's not what we're looking for, you know. Just destroyed my ego and I'm proud of it. Okay. But selflessness is, you know, if you raise your point of tension, which is an expulsive force, to a sufficient degree of intensity, selflessness will appear along the way, and I'm sure we all have our good moments. We have to be more effective than ever, and you know, as Master Moria says, cultivate fiery striving. Strive fierily. Almost every other book, you know, or strive fierily, fire, fire, fire. Okay, let's do it. During these next 8 years, up till 2025, we have to be and strive to be as spiritually effective as we can be. And this will certainly involve the cultivation of the will. And this is a good year to do it too, you know? And all around us, we're going to see what's called, I tell my friend Harold all the time, the withering of the law. Wherever there's a withering of the law and the uprising of lawlessness on all sides, then I manifest myself from age to age for the preservation of those who do good and the destruction of those who do evil. That's the Bodhisattva pledge, right? Well, we're going to see that, the withering of the law. Do you see signs of it now? Okay, so, right, you do. And somehow internally, using the will planets and Vulcan, spiritual will, and, you know, all your signs of the zodiac, all your planets, you can affirm this inner willingness to affirm the divine plan in the face of the destruction and the withering of the law. Okay, so I just want to say a little bit about the nature of the path. I've spent quite a bit of time on will. In a way, the path sort of precedes the way of higher evolution, although these terms are used rather interchangeably. The ways that are trodden are oftentimes called paths, but what is a path, really? We're on the path, aren't we? On the path, right? So it's a line of activity. It's a directional movement based on choice. The factor of direction is always involved in treading the path. A path is not all paths, you know. You jump on your horse and ride off in all directions. Well, maybe in the early days of Sagittarius, but not now. Now there's a one-pointed pursuit by the disciple who sees the vision leading to revelation. And, you know, it takes a lot of deflective willpower to stay on that path. So interesting that the factor of limitation of choice is always involved with the treading of any path. You have to tread the path of limitation to reach limitlessness. Occultly, a path is ideally a means of progression from the lesser to the greater, but you know, there's other paths. And it might not lead you from the lesser to the greater, but from the greater to the lesser. We don't want to veer off, and until we pass the second degree, and even then, you know, you pass the second degree, but then you go into the desert and you've got a lot of choices to make, so you could still veer off on another path. We don't want to do that, and we won't do that, and he says that the hierarchy has been amazingly successful, and that's why so few choose the left-hand path, leading to, worst case scenario, becoming a black magician. Okay, here's another way of looking at a path. I'm still in my definition of terms phase. Don't worry, I'm going to get practical soon. Okay. Positively, a path is an intensifying point of tension until a goal is reached. Now, I've eliminated space from that. You see that? Usually we think of path as involving space. But what if your point of tension just gets more and more intense, more and more intense? That's a path too, okay? In a way, now, you know, let's take it personally here. Each one of us is a path. Each one of us is a path. We are an emanated path, which is, now here's our identity. Each one of us is a path. We are an emanated path, which is the universal logos or universal monad in extension. That's what we are. We are the universal logos in extension. Do we remember this? Probably not, but the day will come. Our nature, even now, has within it the presence of the one universal monad. How many monads are there? A bunch of them up there? Or is there one? Are all monads one? All monads are one, but they seem to be different due to illusion. Okay, each of us is essentially and equally, now think, each of us is essentially and equally the universal logos, the universal monad. Now, the last time you looked in the mirror, you probably didn't think that. But, you know, basically, that's what we are. If you remove enough veils, what's left but the one being, which we are? So it's a hard realization to grasp. There's so many veils, you know, that have to be lifted. So, while the universal emanative process is active, each one of us is ever a path. We are a pathway from the universal to the particular and from the particular to the universal. And as we exist, we are at all stages upon the path. We are at all points of tension simultaneously. And that's a hard one to think about too, because we think we're here. But what if we're at all stages along the emanated path, including the original one? What about the monad that went forth and stayed at home at the same time? What about the flame that lights other flames but keeps alight? See, I light you, you light, but I'm still there. I'm there and here at the same time. Now, these are going to require time and space destructions. In other words, our usual illusions of time and space have to go so that we can appreciate these other possibilities. We have to meditate upon this, obviously, and most of us have yet to be discovered. Discover this. Okay, so that's a little bit on paths. Now, what's a way? I have so many definitions of terms I may not get to the talk, okay? Just hang on, you know me, I'm a little, long-winded. All right, what is the way? Well, there's no absoluteness about the terms path and way. No absoluteness. We have to explore the context of the word to know what it really means. So a way, in general, is broader and longer than a path, at least the way we usually consider it. So a true way is a direction, a line of esoteric action pursued by those who are already liberated from the lower three worlds. That's when you really start treading ways. A true way is in fact a cosmic path, but we mix the terms. Now, no one can begin to think about treading a true way until he's at least a master. So what are we on now? We're on paths, okay? And they are paths that are lower than the way of higher evolution. So, and that stage is only beginning, okay? That's the beginning. A master is just new to this business of treading the way of high revolution. In the old days, fifth initiation, you started to do this. Now you have to wait until the sixth. A master just sees. That's what revelation is all about. The fifth initiation is called revelation, right? What's revealed? The 7 or 9 cosmic paths. That's what's revealed. Must be quite a sight, you know? Okay, then of course you choose the right one. On our planet at this time, it is the Chohans who truly begin to tread the way of high revolution, on which each cosmic path is a way to the stars. Now that sounds, like, somewhere over the rainbow, but apparently that's how it is. And later to constellations and galactic arms and galaxies and families of galaxies and cosmic superstructures. I mean, if things are too big, they make the mind shut down. But let's go anyway. And the hub of the one universal wheel, the universal logos, that's where it all leads, that inconceivable being whom we are. That's where the Antakarana goes. And where we're humbly sitting here trying to work with a word of power and a couple of colors and a point of tension and all the rest of it, we may not think that that's where it goes, but it leads to the way of high revolution, and the destiny of each one of us is extraordinary, as we well know, having experienced it infinitudinous times. Unless, of course, you think that the great breath at one point began. Know what I mean? Whatever it is has been breathing eternally. Okay. No beginning, no beginning. It's so hard. When I was a kid, I said, how can something exist without beginning or ending? And most of us, locked in our concrete mind, can't figure it out. But that's the way the great breath is. So now, having defined our terms, what is the relation between the will and the way, the will and the path? So our objective is to understand the nature of will and to cultivate that will so that we can tread the path appropriate to us and eventually find the great way of higher evolution. All the while, necessarily helping below, even as we look above. I look above, I help below, I dream not nor I rest. That aspirational mantra. This is the key, and there's no true advance unless the one who looks above also helps below, and this is called service. And there's no way to tread these great paths of ever more universal service except to serve. So, hopefully, we're very familiar with that, and I think we are. The right use of the will keeps us on the chosen path, even now, long before we are masters of Chohans. And the will insulates us from errancy, vagary, wandering, meandering. I have a little quote here. This is one of my favorite. I have to laugh. Maybe it doesn't relate to any of you, but I know what this means. Okay. A brief period of organized effort and at the end death is of more vital usefulness than a futile doing of the things a man feels like doing in a leisurely way and then meandering feebly down the years. I don't want to do the feeble meander, do you? Externalization, page 382. So, that's that nice second-ray master, being really nice and kind and saying, don't meander feebly. Okay, so will, choice, limitation, these things go hand in hand. Up and down, in and out. You don't need to have the will to be all things because one already forever is all things. Now that's called identification. Just think about that. Right now we're kind of encapsulated, but what happens when it all breaks and we realize that we are the one infinite being in self-extension? That's going to be quite a day, and it'll change our whole attitude. At the dawning of each universe, in a beginningless, endless, infinite series of universes, the will to tread the descending way becomes an emanative path, one way and not another, or one path becoming one way and not another. Thus, will confines our direction, leading to intentional fulfillment. Thus will, it propels the first action, that action being the manner in which absoluteness becomes absolute deity, and propels all subsequent actions following that first. All the ways are created in that. Of the modes of divine will, I'm particularly partial to the will to fulfillment. It's a kind of a second-ray will. You know how Aries, Leo, and Capricorn are involved in this? It's the fulfillment of your emanative descent into manifestation, or your emanative retraction into full identity as the one being in the universe. You know, sure, we have to create and we have to conquer death, we have to do all that, but for me the second mode of will, the will to fulfillment, is the one on which I'm concentrating on. Now I got to ask you, are you fulfilled? It's a big Jupiterian question, you know. How fulfilled are we? I don't think, you know, I mean, unless we, the answer's got to be no, okay? I mean, you know, relatively we're fulfilled, but none of us is truly fulfilled. And if we take this far enough, it means that none of us is yet the fully conscious monad, and even farther and farther, and none of us is the... Fulfillment will come when you are the universe. I know it sounds preposterous, but that's it, you know. And then I wonder if the universal logos feels fulfilled, being only an infinitesimal of the absolute infinity, but that's another question. So, are we fulfilled? We're heading for it. You know, our causal body, our egoic lotus is getting richer and richer and more radiant, and we're on the path to greater and greater fulfillment, and the will to tread these paths and the way to fulfillment. And of course we want that, you know, the more you are fulfilled, the amazing thing, of course, the more you feel this wonderful expansiveness, the more you want it for other people. I mean, isn't it so, really? You know, if you're really unhappy about yourself and you just feel alone and miserable, you end up being selfish. But when you start really expanding, don't you want that for other people too? You know, the Christ certainly does, so, and we're supposed to imitate him. So we have to find this progressive fulfillment. We want to offer that opportunity to other beings. We will to do this. We will to be bodhisattvas, you know, on the way of seeing others fulfilled. Other people who are really aspects of our self, the one and only self. So we're heading for the great fulfillment. It requires will to reach that. We reach something we might call monadhood eventually, and that's just the beginning of a inconceivable fulfillment. This is a great adventure. We're cultivating the will. Our destiny is immense. Humanity is ignorant. They don't know it. The ageless wisdom has come forward to give us this tremendous vision of possibilities which will give life to so many people. And we, carrying the light to others, have to offer the kind of hope that the ageless wisdom can provide. And especially during the next 8 years, when the clash of values is going to be tremendous, and the old and the new, and the chakras below the diaphragm of humanity and above the diaphragm of humanity are going to be fighting it out. We have something that is like the greatest treasure, the ageless wisdom, you know. And so I would just encourage you, and I would encourage myself, to reach as many people. You know, the will to illumine comes right out of Shambhala, right? There's all these different varieties of will. The will to carry the light, to carry this light to others who are lost in God knows what. You know, I met a homeless woman here the other night, and I invited her to come to the astrology thing. She was a Scorpio with Scorpio rising, right on the, you know, Scorpio. And no place to sleep, nothing, you know, nothing. She came first day and she enjoyed it. It was, you know, little, you know, the jargon we use, but the people are in terrible shape. And, you know, sometimes we think that we've got to work on those issues. You know, hands-on on those issues, and we do, and people have to do that. But remember that when we inspire the thinkers of the world with the ageless wisdom, it's going to reach everybody. And it's one of the most effective ways of operating. And when we develop the Triangles Network and the Goodwill, and we do these occult practices, it's going to change things internally. So never think like you're not doing enough when you're doing occult work, because it's like a great lever, you know. You can raise far more than you think with occultism. Now we have to have the will to do that. And we have to master ourselves in a way that we, you know, using Vulcan, let Vulcan get a grip on your personality, and in the next 8 years get out of ourselves everything we can, you know. A friend of mine said, well, hierarchy is, you're like a turnip, and hierarchy is going to squeeze you until it gets all the juice out it possibly can. So, you know, let's get everything out of ourselves that we can, and let's have the will to do that. There's so many varieties of will, but I would just say, you know, the will to spread the ageless wisdom. That's what Master DK says. He says, I'm obliged to teach and spread the knowledge of the ageless wisdom wherever I can find a response. So, you know, he's training so many of us, so, and we're pretty rich when it comes to our studies and our understanding of things. So let's take the responsibility seriously and teach and spread the knowledge of the ageless wisdom to give hope to humanity and a great inspiration in this time of the withering of the law. Because, you know, will is law. And someone has to uphold this. And we will uphold the glorious radiance of the ageless wisdom in these next 8 years. Okay, thank you.